Yo, what's up?
What's up, man?
How's it going?
Pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm good, good. So I think the plans were probably gonna try to play some hand and brain versus like just doing a lesson because the event tomorrow. I don't know if you looked at it all, but we're playing hand and brain. Do you know what hand and brain is?
Yeah. So you're going to be picking the move, but you can't tell me which piece. So if you say knight, you can't say which knight, and you can't say where the piece goes, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Do I make the move or do you make the move? I'm actually not sure, honestly. One second, I'm trying to
You're
sound up.
you're the brain, and I'm the hand. That's what the
Okay,
turn
so that
turn.
means I just say like knight or pawn or bishop and so forth, I think. Let me make sure. Let me turn your volume all the way up. Okay, yeah. Okay, so let me
And I
just go
and I
ahead.
think they don't. I think they don't want us to discuss lines. Like I don't think they want you to say I want you to move the knight, then the bishop, then the rook.
Oh
But
no,
he
no,
said
of
that they're
course, of course not.
right. Okay.
Yeah. Are you on in live chess?
Yeah, I'm live right now.
Okay.
It's the I Mighty Hutch, all one word. Do you have people
Oh,
to
okay.
spar against for
Yeah, I think we do have some people. So I think it'll probably, I don't know if it's gonna be your account or probably it should be you playing because you're gonna be the hand tomorrow. So yeah, we have someone who will just automatically, one of the mods will start the game. So I do you know the time control for tomorrow?
my chat told me it's 10-5.
10-5. Okay, so then I think, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just play games at 10-5.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, sounds good.
so I think, yeah, there's just some mods and they'll start the games automatically. So how have you been doing since PogChamps 1?
I haven't been playing much chess, so this is it's good that we're doing this to get me sort of back into that mindset. But
Actually, I realized like that was already June, wasn't it, of last year?
it was June of 2020.
I think so. Yeah, it's crazy. It feels like it
Uh
doesn't feel that long ago, but yeah. All right, so I'll say, um, so since this isn't like formal, what openings do you play with black? Because I think that is important that we know. Um,
I usually play e5
okay,
and then knight to c3 or sorry c6.
okay, so yeah, so then what I do here is I say pawn, for example,
Right. I would do that.
because it is kind of important that I like, for example, yeah, and so knight.
Oh, I should probably wait for you to
Yeah. So when we
say the
actually play,
piece.
you have to wait for me to say the piece. But it is important now that we get the openings down. So I'll say pawn, sorry.
I'm gonna guess you mean this. And the other discussion was that I don't think I'm supposed to ask you if I got it right.
Right. Yeah. So it's
Right.
I mean I think I'll probably be pretty stone faced. So I'm gonna say, well, since this isn't formal, what would you normally play against the Scotch?
I would just simplify probably and just take.
Okay, so knight. Let's say knight.
Ooh. Okay. Is this? I don't know if this is the line.
So yeah, the move that I was looking for was knight to e7 to move the knight to c6 to hit the queen. But
Gotcha.
anyway, knight.
Okay. I guess we could just go back.
Yeah, so I mean it's okay, so it's our move. So I'm gonna say let's say pawn.
Okay. I'm gonna guess you mean this pawn.
Yeah, good. So it's kind of curious. You used to stream chess long before chess became popular, right?
Back in 2014, 2015. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of people on Twitch doing it at the time.
Right. So I'm
And I
curious,
think
like, could you have ever imagined it becoming what it's become now, or it's like, I mean, because you've been around for a long time, you're almost like an OG at this point.
yeah, I could totally imagine. In fact, I'm a little surprised that it took as long, just because I know that chess can be a very hypnotizing and addicting game. So yeah, I totally saw the potential there, I would say.
All right, so let's go with knight.
Okay, so you can't mean knight to h6. That wouldn't make any sense. So we're gonna do it this way. And then what got you interested in Twitch and getting on Twitch? Was it? Did you? I mean, how did that pique your interest?
All right, so first let's go with Knight.
Knight again, huh? Okay, so I think this is probably the most logical move.
Good move. Now, see, again, I said good move. Now, in a normal situation, of course, I can't say that because that's only going to build up your confidence.
Right.
So, yes, you asked me how I got into Twitch, and that was mainly because of Danny Wrench, who I think he set up some matches for you, like against, I feel like Urshel and maybe a couple other people quite a few years back. But basically, he kind of suggested the idea. I think chess.com, they were trying to sort of get into streaming and like and get people to consistently stream it, and they just spoke to me, and Danny really was the guy who convinced me to. So let's go with Knight here.
Knight again. Okay, so we do that.
But really, I think to me, it's like it's always had potential because I feel like everybody knows what chess is, even if they don't really play. Let's go with Bishop.
I'm gonna assume you mean this bishop here.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
Get ready for a castle.
Let's go with pawn.
Oof. Okay. With pawn, eh? What do you mean? Oh, do you want a fianchetto? You want a fianchetto, don't you?
So actually, the reason I said pawn instead of castle was because there's a certain square here that's very problematic potentially. And
the f7 pawn.
The f7 pawn is a little bit weak here, but also when you look at the center of the board, like you see how your knight on e5, and our opponent found it. Like the idea that I had was you could push the pawn to c6 to stop the knight from jumping. That was the idea that I had originally. So let's go with
Ooh, this is kind of tough right now.
Let's go with let's go with knight.
Okay. I think you mean here to protect the bishop.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Position's pretty bad, but at least the game goes on here.
Who's the brain that we're up against over here?
Okay, so this guy actually, I think he's a chef. I think this is one of the players, one of the people from my community. I think he's actually a chef, and he's trying to get on some show or something. So that's what he does, but he also plays chess at a very high level too.
Kalkaber, I recognize that name. I think maybe they've popped up in my chat before.
Yeah, they've been I think a longtime supporter. Oh, he's also a streamer too, actually, which I didn't know either. Anyway, let's go with king here.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like within the chess community, there's certain people you see they're popping in and around everywhere. Let's go with bishop.
Okay. I think you mean go here.
It's a good move. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the thing is, we're ahead by one pawn. So since we're ahead by one pawn, the one thing that white has to do right away is try to attack immediately, because if we get time to develop our pieces, we're in the long run, we're just going to be ahead by one pawn, and so therefore white has to do something immediately versus like just playing natural moves. Gotcha. And e6 was the best move, by the way, Hutch, because if we didn't go to e6, white would have been able to take the knight and then take the bishop on e7 with the rook and the knight. Gotcha. So bishop e6 was the perfect move.
Right. It's going to be tough to do like the time like if we're in time challenge to do it that way. That might be a little tough.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to turn off my instincts to just move real quick when I'm low on.
I think what I would say is generally, I mean, I'll try to give some kind of suggestion within at most 10 seconds. I think based on getting sort of a feel of what we're doing with the openings here, it should be a lot easier tomorrow, because if we know what the first 10 moves are, I think it's very unlikely that we'll get into like a situation where we have 30 seconds.
Okay.
Oh. Okay, let's go with queen.
Ooh, even though the
So yeah, the reason I said queen instead of knight was because I was worried about like the queen coming to h5 and checkmate ideas. So let's go with Queen.
My spidey sense says go here. Because now if he takes and I take with a pawn, I'm opening up an attack on that f2 pawn.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So that's actually it's very good if you can open up the file. Basically, with the rooks, if you see here, there's only one open file. So if white trades like bishops, then yes, your rook is the rook can go down towards the f2. But then secondly, if you can't really open the f file for the rook, there's one other way you can bring the rook into the game, like rook e8 and so forth.
Right.
This is pretty good so far. The opening was a little bit shaky, but if you don't have a set opening against the Scotch defense like your opponent played, then I think we should take a look at after this game.
Okay. So did you have first pick in the draft?
So it's interesting. I basically was told that I was given a list of a few people that I could choose from. Kind of. I know there were certain people who basically just said they would only play with X player or X streamer or so forth. But I kind of was just given a list, and you were right up there at the top of the people that I thought I would actually have the most fun with playing in the event. Let's go with Queen.
Okay.
All three moves there are playable. I think actually Queen takes and F takes were probably the two best moves. I think H takes was slightly dubious. Okay, let's go with Rook.
So now the question is, do I leave one of the rooks on the F file, or do I swing this one here? I'm thinking move the F rook here to the E file. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, so I think the thing is also when you have situations like this where there isn't a lot happening, like there are no real tactics or it's a very slow position, I would say that generally just try to make the move quicker. Don't spend too much time. Just move one of the rooks, but don't hesitate and spend like 20 or 30 seconds. Let's go with bishop.
We could immediately attack the queen. I don't know if that's what you had in mind, but I'm gonna do it.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I mean there are a couple moves with the bishop, but that's definitely one of the best moves. I actually also like bishop f5.
Bishop to f5. Oh, I see.
To maybe go bishop e4, but anyway, it's fine. Let's go with rook.
Do we double these up now? I think we probably double up here. Yeah, let's do it. Huh? That's my instinct every time. It's just when I see that there's an open file like that to just double up right away.
Yeah, there's nothing really going on, that's almost always going to be the best idea. Let's go with rook.
I think I want to keep control of this file, but then my back rank is a little vulnerable. I am going to do that. I want to keep control of that file.
It's a very good move.
Also got to be careful here because he's lined up with his queen and bishop on my G file, so I just need to be a little bit aware of that.
So bishop.
Okay, I think probably here makes the most sense. And now we have a bishops of opposite colors with a pawn advantage, which
right. So at a very high level, this okay. Let's go with bishop.
Oof. Okay, this is too tempting.
That is important, because otherwise there's queen a8 and there could be a back rank checkmate.
Oh, I wasn't even looking at that. Oh boy. Well, I was very flattered that you picked me, Hikaru. You're one of my chess idols here.
I mean, you're one of the OGs, one of the people who was streaming chess way back in the old days. So, and also you came so close to winning in PogChamps 1. You very easily could have won that. So let's go with queen.
See now, because of the bishops of opposite colors, is it? I'm wondering it. I know you can't answer, but I'm wondering if it's better to simplify it or leave the queen leave the queen on the board. But I also have to be careful with that mate there. I think I'll just take here.
Right. So one reason I like the capture here is that what ends up happening is, even though it's still opposite color bishops and only one pawn, white has double pawns now in G3 and G2.
Okay.
So let's go with bishop.
Is there anything I can attack right now? Oh, you don't want that bishop to get pinned? Is that what's going on? Where's the most active spot for this bishop here? Maybe right here?
Wow, that's that's the best move.
Oh, okay.
So like, kind of the reason this is, well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. The reason this is best is exactly this reason. So now rook.
Yeah, I got another pawn here, right?
Yeah, because if you'd move the bishop to like a different square instead of D3, the king could have come up and there was no check on D3. So that's why, yeah, rook takes rook. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let's go with pawn.
I'm thinking right up here just to take space, and then also get a little tempo there.
Yeah, there isn't really much that I can say negative about this game other than kind of the opening. I think everything else you're doing this really, really well. This has been almost perfect.
Thanks.
The opening was shaky.
It got a little. Yeah, I'm not. Openings are probably where I struggle the most.
All right,
I remember you
pawn.
gassing me up. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, because you played the 4 pawns. That's why. Yeah, anyway,
No,
yeah,
because
pawn.
of that, I think I sacrificed a piece in my game with Voyboy to bust open his king side, and it was sort of a move, like an accidental stroke of
Oh,
brilliance.
you're talking about the first game, right? Actually,
was that the first game?
That was the first
remember.
game, yeah, because you won that game. It was very. I think that was the first game, right? Yeah, it was the first game that you won, because the second game you lost in the 4 pawns and the King's Indian, which was crazy.
No. So did you say pawn right here?
I said pawn, yeah.
Okay, so I think you got to get my king active, right? So
yeah, but the thing was, like, in that first game you sacked a piece and it wasn't technically correct, but it was very tricky and hard to play. And without like absolutely perfect precise play, the sacrifice worked. So if you'd been playing someone who's a little bit stronger, like, actually not even a little bit, but someone who's like 2000 or better, maybe they would have been able to take advantage of it. But against like someone who's also 1500, I think it was a great sack. And then the second game is when you played this insane 4 pawns and and you blunder in the opening, because it's just such a it's sort of so, it's not stable at all. It's so unstable in terms of where the pawns are that you end up in trouble. Let's go with pawn.
Oh, okay. My gut tells me to do this.
Yeah, because I felt like it was weird, because it seemed like you were so positional throughout the event, and then in the King's Indian to suddenly play the when Voivoda played the King's Indian, to suddenly play the 4 pawns attack against it. It didn't seem to really fit with your style, so that's why it was so confusing. Let's go with bishop.
Okay. Well, this.
This is good.
I don't really. Oh,
yeah, see, this is just bishop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see, because like the way that even this game you're playing, let's go with bishop. Like, even the way you're playing this game, it feels very positional. So like when you played Voivoda in that second game after winning the first one, it was like, why are you playing this 4 pawn setup that's so dangerous and kind of in a way too aggressive? Because it didn't feel like it fit with the sort of way that you play the game of chess. Let's go with king.
Oh, it's a terrible opening.
It's not a terrible opening, I mean, to be clear, but like you really have to understand it very well, because all the basic dynamics that sort of apply with developing and castling and all these things, they don't apply in the 4 pawns because your center is so brittle. Let's go with king.
I think there makes the most sense.
Let's go with rook. But yeah, I just, to me it was surprising because that first game that you won against Voivod was a really nice game, and I was expecting something much more dry and relaxed. And in the 4 pawns, you have to know what you're doing, because since you push 4 pawns in your first like 6 moves, if you're not super precise, the center with all your pawns, it just collapses. Let's go with pawn.
With pawn. Okay.
Let's go with rook. Let's go with king.
Oh boy, I don't know what to do here. I guess we can. I mean, if we go up, we lose a pawn, though. But do you want me to go up? But if I don't go up, if I go to d7, then that pawn's going to be really vulnerable in a second. Actually, is it, though? I think here. And then I can push the pawn, and it's protected by the bishop if he attacks it.
That's one idea. I mean, that's one idea. Let's see if he plays it, though. I do think we're probably one of the stronger teams, though, from what I saw. I think there's like Boy maybe, and I think there's also maybe this Benji Fishy who's quite strong, but I think we are probably one of the favorite teams.
Okay. Typically, I don't like pressure situations, high pressure situations, but I'm gonna try to catch up for you.
Rook.
Oh, okay. This is kind of dodgy for him, huh?
Bishop.
Is that me?
Nice.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, so before we play the next one, let me just let me create an analysis board. Just give me 1 second. Because I do think there's a chance that one of our opponents could play the Scotch opening, so it is worth noting that we should have something there. So let me just do this.
Yeah, I'd love some tips on that opening.
Sure.
Now, can you just pull me into your analysis board?
I'd invite you, but you should see it like bottom right hand corner. You should see an invite. Okay. It's I the Mighty Hutch, right?
The I Mighty Hutch.
Oh, the I. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
I know it's a little confusing.
Yeah. Now you should see it in the bottom right hand corner. The I Mighty Hutch. Yeah. All right. Okay. So yeah. So basically, with this game, when your opponent plays the Scotch opening here, there are a couple ways that you can respond. First of all, since it's probably the least likely, what do you plan to do against Bishop to B5 if they play the Ruy Lopez? Or what do you play, rather, I should say?
I usually do knight to e7, but I don't know if that's a good response.
And then if they play like let's just say the castle here.
I might fiend cut on my dark squared bishop and just push g6. Right.
So okay, that's very good with bishop g7. All right, perfect. So now knight e7, they can also play like c3 here. So what I think we should play is, again, just g6 here.
Okay.
And if d4, bishop to g7.
And then if they push the pawn on d5, do I just retreat? Okay.
Yeah, I think the idea is to retreat and just castle followed by d6. But the more I think about this, the more complicated it seems to be. So let me see if there's a simpler way to do this after c3. trying to think of what a simpler way to play the system is, because I mean I actually played this quite a bit, but I play a much more complicated version of it. So okay, so g6 d4. Actually, no, let's do it differently. Let's play a6 here first. If they play it like this with c3, let's play a6.
Okay.
And so now they're gonna go bishop to a4, and now let's play g6, and on d4 let's actually trade the pawns here and go pawn to d5.
Okay.
And in this position they can either like take the pawn, they can play e5, or they can play knight c3. So let's say they take on d5. We'll take back with the knight. They're probably going to castle. If white plays like bishop g5 here, for example, you can just kind of ignore it and move the queen to d6 with the same idea of moving the bishop and castling the king.
Yep. Okay.
And if they castle here, then we'll go bishop g7. And now if they go bishop g5, it's the same thing. You just move the queen to d6 and castle next move. If rook e1, just block with the bishop and castle.
Gotcha.
And if they check right away, it's the same thing. We just go bishop to e6 with the same idea of castling next move. And
what if they go knight to g5 in this spot?
Right, good. And so now you castle here. And what
really?
You're probably like thinking that you're blundering something here in the middle of the board, right?
A little bit, yeah. But I'm also, I guess I have a pawn on d4 that I could gobble up.
Right. So there are a couple things. First of all, if white like takes with the knight on e6 and takes, the pawn d4 is under attack. But also when you look at the queen side, white has 3 pieces that aren't developed. So your ideas of like bishop d4 and knight d4 combined with queen h4 as well are very, very dangerous. So even though you're potentially giving up a pawn here, like it's very easy to develop here and attack, because your opponent's gonna have to waste time getting these 3 pieces into the game. So even though they can take like on e6, for example, you can play something like which one's best? There are many moves that are good, but like knight takes d4. Now let's say white goes rook e1, you can go queen to h4, attacking the pawn on f2.
Oof. Okay.
And if white plays like g3, you just go queen h3 with the idea of knight to f3 with the 4.
Yep.
And if white plays something like knight d2, you can go like rook, not rook f3, you can go rook takes f2.
Rook takes f2. Okay, now this is some high level stuff here.
So you can make moves also.
Okay,
by the way.
you can swing over with the rook, and then he's like really in a lot
right.
of trouble
So what happens when I take with the rook?
So rook to f8, and then he has to go back, or unless there's a better move here.
Yeah. So you can actually make moves as well. So in this position, you actually shouldn't go rook f8, because if you go rook f8, I go king g1, and now you're just down a rook.
Okay. Wait. Can you back that up
Sure,
a second?
yep.
Okay. Oh, queen takes pawn.
Yeah, you can make the moves. Yeah, and now I go here.
And then rook check.
Right. Now the only way to stop it is to block with my knight.
And then no, don't do that.
Yeah, no, that's actually correct.
That is right.
I mean,
Okay.
you can maybe take. You can probably take with a knight also, but again, after queen takes king here, it gets very complicated. But just to see, can you find the correct move here after bishop f4? There's one move that's really good here. There probably are other ways to win, but there's one move that's very strong.
Okay. Let me just look at this real quick. You have the queen check, but then he just moves up. The king moves up to that spot. Then you have another check with the rook, but then he can just kind of retreat to the d file.
Right. So so with the queen moves, the first thing is you can check here. And what happens if white goes king e2?
Discovered on his queen here.
Exactly. Yeah, and now you win the queen on d5. Exactly. Okay. But the problem with queen h1 is white can actually go king f2. And now you don't really sort of have any good checks here.
Okay. So what's the best move then?
It's not queen h1 and it's not queen g1. So I'll give you that hint. What other moves can you think of that make sense here?
I don't know. I feel kind of stumped right now.
Right. So when you're behind, like with a lot, when you're behind by like a rook or like even like a knight or a bishop, generally you have to be looking for ways to go for checks or checkmating patterns. So if the queen checks don't work on h1 and g1, are there, I mean, first of all, look for the checks. What are the possible checks here? Right, so there's queen h3, so there's 1, there's 2, and there's like h1 g1 h3. So we've already kind of concluded these two don't really do a lot. So on queen h3, if white just goes king f2, do you have any other way to kind of follow up and keep attacking? I mean, you can obviously take the rook, but then I'm going to recapture.
Yeah, so you got this check here.
Right, but now white can take on f3.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that doesn't work.
So there are 3 checks with the queen. Are there any other checks that you see here?
Yeah, you have a knight check, but I don't know how productive that is. What am I missing here? I don't see what you're pointing at.
Yeah, so the move that you have is knight check.
Oh, okay, because he's covered by the queen. Okay.
Right, because the king can't move anywhere because the queen covers all the other squares, and when white takes, you just take because there's a pin.
Very crafty. Okay.
So this is actually the correct kind of idea is to play knight d2. But anyway, I mean, this is all pretty advanced and most likely won't happen. But just keep in mind that when the basic development idea that we want to play for is that if the opponent tries to create the center right away with c3 and d4 and get the pawns here, that we take and we go d5 to prevent white from pushing the pawn himself.
Okay.
So that's the most important thing in the Spanish. And if they castle, then we just go g6, and if they play d4, we trade and go bishop g7, and this should be completely fine here. I mean, we're just going to castle next move, and if knight takes knight, I think just take back with the knight and castle, followed by d6 and develop the bishop to g4 or e6.
Why wouldn't you do like okay, never mind.
Okay. You can make moves too.
Well, I was thinking d5 after this here, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense because
yeah, you can't really go d5 because white is covering it with both the pawn and the queen.
Yeah.
So what you want to do here is, let's just say white moves the knight out, you castle your king. And again, there are many ways for white to play. Let's just say bishop e3. You can play like d6. Let's say queen d2. You can go like rook e8. I don't even know how someone would play this necessarily, but let's just say white plays like rook e1, and now you can go like bishop to e6, and the idea is potentially you can move your queen to h4, but you can also just go a6 and b5 to get rid of this bishop here on b5 right away.
What do you do if they play bishop to h6 here and just offer up that trade?
Right, so if they play bishop h6, you want to keep the bishops on the board and go back to h8 here.
Why is it important with a fianchetto position like that? Is it just because your king side is going to be so loose without that bishop?
Yeah, so basically I'm just going to make a random move. It doesn't really matter because it's just don't even consider a move like this. But if you get some position like this, the reason it's generally pretty bad is because white can play something like knight d5, and there's a lot of pressure on this diagonal with the knight on c6 and the rook on e8. But secondly, there's also another big problem, which is that I can go queen c3, and with the queen and the knight, you're going to have dark square problems as well.
Yeah, it's going to be brutal. Okay.
So in some situations you can trade bishops, but I would say especially in these e5 setups, you do not want to trade, which is why after a move like queen d2, I do recommend playing rook e8. So when white goes here, you can go back, because if you don't do that, then you can't avoid it without losing a rook on f8.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So that's what I would say. So all right, I think that's good. Let me just taking a look at the Scotch for a second. So after takes knight, what I wanted you to play was not so different, which was to trade the knights and go knight to e7. Now, one of the basic rules again that like, especially when we're giving lessons, we tell players who are new to the game, don't bring your queen out early. So you see the queen's kind of out early. Now mind you, it was a trade of knights, but the idea is to move the knight here, attack the queen, and force white to waste time moving the queen back. So let's just say knight c3 happens, go knight c6. Now
they also tell you don't move the same piece twice, but I mean these
also yeah. So I mean it's like kind of both sides violate the rules in a sense. But what it does allow is a very simple free-flowing idea to put the bishop on b4 or c5, and again you're just going to castle and follow it up with d6 here.
Okay.
So let's just say, I don't know, white moves the queen back to d1. You can play something like bishop to c5. I guess white can go like bishop c4 or d3. It doesn't really matter wherever, but just you can go d6. Make sure that there are no threats like a queen d5 here, because now like if queen d5, the pawn protects, you just castle.
Also, eventually you can force a trade or something with like bishop on e6 if he stays there.
Exactly, yeah. So I think what I would say is like, this is bishop c4. You just go here. It's a very, very simple position to play. Let's say white castles. You can castle, and now there are a couple ideas that you can play for. One idea is you can actually get very aggressive. Let's say white plays a3. Not necessarily the best move, but you can go like knight to e5, attacking the bishop. And as the bishop goes back to a2, you can now go queen to h4.
Okay.
And there are a lot of ideas, like you have this idea with knight g4, putting a lot of pressure on h2 and f2. And you also have other ideas, like let's just say white goes like bishop e3. You can go bishop to g4, attacking the queen. And white can't push.
He can't push that pawn. Okay. Yeah.
And if let's just say white goes like queen d2, you can actually go knight to f3.
What is this malarkey? Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then after takes, yeah, it's just, and if bishop f4, what's your move?
Bishop f. What is my move? Then you would just go to right here, right?
Exactly, and there's no way to stop the checkmate in one with the bishop and the queen.
Gotcha.
So there are a couple ways to play, but I think like generally, the idea in this Scotch variation when you trade is, if you trade the knights, you want to bring the knight to c6 to make sure the queen has to move out of the center of the board. Very, very important, I would say.
Interesting. I've never played that. I've never even thought to play that, the double knight move there.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you haven't looked at Scotch, you wouldn't have seen it, and even so, it's kind of unusual because, like I said, trading the knights, trading everything in the center is a little bit odd. But then this maneuver of moving the knight to c6 also, it seems a little bit strange. But that's what I think we should do. And let's just say white plays like bishop c4. You can go knight to f6, and if white goes like queen d5, you can very quietly move queen f6.
And then
the idea, let's just say white castles.
Well, what if they hit me with their bishop here?
Right, so let me just go through this one first, because yeah, bishop g5 is the move, but the idea is basically that since white has brought the queen and bishop out so early, you can just move the bishop and attack the queen and white's bishop as well. But you're wondering about bishop g5, so now you go queen g6.
Gotcha. Okay.
And now you have another potential threat as well, with like knight b4 at the right moment. Again, since I think I am the brain, I definitely if I say something like a knight, the move I think should be pretty obvious generally once we're past the opening. Like if I say knight,
you make me look stupid tomorrow when I make the wrong move.
Oh well, no, I mean, like, I think past the opening, based on the simplicity of the setups, it shouldn't be that difficult. Like this opening with knight e7, knight c6 is very simple. It's very smooth. There aren't a lot of like different ideas, which I think is really important when you're playing hand and brain. That like you know what your partner plays in the way of an opening, so that, you know, for example, like when in this one when I said knight and you didn't know and you went here after e5, black's already very bad and black's like probably losing technically. So I think like this idea of knight e7 and knight c6 is very important, but it's also very smooth and easy to play.
Okay, because
you just move the knight and then you move the bishop here. Also, I mean, like, even if white goes here and moves the queen back, you can't go to c5 because of the bishop, but you can still play something like g6 if you want to, even, and just go here, castles, d6, and play much of the same stuff as before.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is super helpful.
So all right, I think we're gonna do one more game. I think we're gonna play with white, but we're gonna play someone much stronger now, because I think everyone's kind of grinding and getting very serious about this from what I saw earlier today. So we're gonna play with the white piece. So let's go with pawn. Okay, I assume you play. Okay, I'll say pawn. This is what you play normally, right?
Yeah, I've been a Queen's Gambit player my whole life.
Okay, so let's go with knight. Let's go with knight. Yeah, this is all pretty standard so far. Very, very good. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like you've improved from like, I guess at the start of like PogChamps 1 to where you were by the end? Do you feel like you'd improved a bit? Do you feel like it was kind of the same, or like how did you like enjoy the experience, or how was the experience, I should say?
No, I definitely feel like I improved a little bit. But again, I haven't really been playing too much. But the
Mm-hmm.
little bit that I have played, I've been more careful, and I took a lot of the lessons that I got from you and Botez. And um, anytime you can get lessons from grandmasters, I mean, it's a pretty big deal. So,
All right, so what, this is actually important. What do you normally play here?
well, I usually will play either bishop to f4 or bishop to g5. To get that bishop out of the pawn chain before I
Nice.
solidify on
Okay, so
e3.
yeah, so I'll go with bishop then. Yeah, it's important because there are several options here. Like you can move the bishop. You can also could also play e3, which is another variation. So it's important that I know. Also, apparently the first game tomorrow will be at 1:15. That's what I'm being told.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know how many games we're playing tomorrow? Or how long this tournament's gonna? Is it
Yeah, so
all? Is it all?
I got a sheet. I think after the game I'll open it and we can go over it, because I saw some of the rules, and it says, yeah, there's a group stage, so we can go out, we can go through it after the game. All right, let's go with bishop.
Okay. I usually take here because it's like my bad bishop there. Good
Let's
bishop.
go with pawn.
Lock it up.
Yeah, this is, I mean, pretty standard so far. I like what you're doing. Let's go with bishop.
I usually go here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, one way of looking at the opening especially is sort of, you shouldn't doubt yourself or hesitate as much, because in the opening stage, like, the difference between a bishop d3 or bishop to e2 is very, very minimal. So sort of a slight inaccuracy should not be something that really is going to affect us against the other competitors. So let's go with king. But yeah, that's,
Although I was gonna say, like, hand and brain might get a little complicated when you get into sort of like the slower positional games, because I feel like you typically have a lot more candidate moves in these kind of slower games.
well, the good thing is in this position, there are a few, but I want to get, what are your ideas? What are you thinking about what you want to play for in this position?
I'm at this one. I'm usually playing for the C file to try to control that C file to open it up.
Okay, so in this case we don't have that option, because actually our opponent forces the issue in the center here. So I'm gonna say pawn.
Well, you have to take this.
Let's go with pawn.
I'm assuming you mean just take here. I don't know what else you could have meant.
Yeah, so far this is pretty good. Let's go with queen. Let's go with rook.
Even if we give them the opportunity to split up our pawns like that.
You're missing something. You're missing something bigger than that.
Okay. Rook. Which rook? I will say this rook here.
Do you see what happens if knight takes knight?
If knight takes knight. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, you get a discovered attack on the queen with check.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So
okay.
So yeah, that's important. But secondly, also, I like that you put this rook here, because like the other rook can go to the c file, which is half open still. With that pawn on c6, it's half open, so the rook can do damage on that c file. Whereas the rook on d1 that came from f1, let's just say it were to go to e1, it couldn't really do anything because there would be a pawn on e3 in the way. So it's the correct placement of the rooks on d1 and c1 here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, this one's looking really, really good for us, because since black can't take with the knight, let's go with bishop.
Ooh, do you want me to sacrifice here? Obviously, you're not going to answer that.
Well, I mean, yeah,
think,
technically I shouldn't
I
say.
think maybe you want me to sacrifice here. I think you do. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, so I think there are multiple moves that are good. This is one of them. You also could move the bishop to e4 or c4, but all three of these moves are pretty good. Pawn. Yeah, so this is really good so far. This has been perfect. I think it's important because like it's I think a lot easier when a player is more positional to do hand and brain than being really aggressive, because if they're playing really aggressively, I think there it's actually much easier to make mistakes, whereas in a position like this I think it's pretty easy to come up with like 2 to 3 moves, and I don't think any of them are ever going to really be bad here.
Was that the move that you had in mind, or did you have another one in mind?
Like I said, all 3 moves were good. That's kind of why I said bishop in that position, was because I felt that all 3 of the bishop moves I was considering, they're all pretty much equally good. It's not like one of them is only one of them is good and the rest are terrible. So that's why I said it.
What were the
Okay, so pawn. Let's go with queen.
I see. I think I see. So you throw the check and then you can take the pawn afterwards?
Well, I wasn't, the funny thing is originally I was not intending to do that. So I'm going to stick to my original plan, which is queen.
Now, do you mean some weirdo move like?
Now, one thing that I think is also important for when we play hand and brain tomorrow is that, remember, again, I'm trying to think about it from your perspective as well. So like, I'm not looking at it from the perspective of what the absolute best move is. I'm looking at sort of it more from like, when I think about the moves that you can play, where are there like 2 or 3 moves, what moves make a lot of sense, and there isn't really a lot of risk for making a blunder or making a big mistake.
It's not clear to me what you had in mind, but this feels like a decent move right here.
Again, there were 2 moves that I liked. There was this one, and there was also queen to d4. So it's actually very reasonable.
Okay, because you got that isolated pawn, and it could be a liability for him to devote all his resources to protecting that pawn.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because basically, do you know what the situation is with what this pawn on d5 is? Like, say you could put the knight on d4. You see how your knight's on c3? If you could magically put your knight on d4 and it block his pawn, do you know there's a term for this pawn on d5 here?
Do you call it a pass pawn?
Actually, it can become a pass pawn if you can get down the board. That is actually correct. But it's what we call an isolated pawn, because there are no pawns next to it to support it potentially.
Right. Yes.
So let's go with rook.
I think you want me to double up, but or do you? Or do you want me to attack his queen? No, I think you want me to double up. We're gonna do it like this.
Also, I think what's important to note here is that because this pawn on d5 is isolated, it's very easy to attack it, and it's very hard for black to kind of defend in a sense.
Well, now where do I go if he just pushes his pawn here? Maybe I should have put it on D2.
Yeah, I mean both squares are good. The one thing, okay, let's go with rook. The one thing that's important is that, remember, this is a light square bishop, so the more things you have on dark squares, the less likely it is that the bishop can attack. Let's go with rook.
Just stop it from pushing, right?
Yeah, you're good.
And now he's got, you know, two solid rooks there that are just completely devoted to protecting this pawn.
Exactly. So basically the thing is, the rooks are devoted to the pawn, but also the bishop on e6, it also can't really move here. So it's kind of like where, okay, let's go with queen.
I think, should I just, maybe I should just scoot over just right here.
So basically, again, you see like the bishop on e6 here, it guards the pawn, but it doesn't really do anything otherwise. And
Right.
that's really important.
See, this is where I struggle sometimes, because I can identify a weakness, but it's not always clear to me how to exploit it in the most efficient way.
Yeah, so in this position, actually, it's very hard, because both sides are attacking and defending it with the same amount of pieces. So you can't actually win the pawn here. But what you need to do, and this is a general rule in chess, and in this position it's quite hard to do it, but in general, if your opponent has one weakness that is one weakness that they have for like a long time, the way that you try to win games is by creating additional weaknesses on one side or the other side of the board, so your opponent has to worry about multiple things versus just having to worry about this one weakness on d5.
Yeah.
So let's go with pawn.
Okay, so with that in mind, I think probably something like this.
Let's go with rook.
I guess I have to be a little careful here. Not too careful because it's covered. All right, we'll do it that way. I want to keep that pawn blockaded.
Let's go with rook. Let's go with rook.
Okay, well, I guess I got to do it this way then.
Let's go with knight.
I think you want me to put it here.
And again, remember how this is it's an isolated pawn or isolated queen pawn here on the square. If you can blockade pawns that potentially can become pass pawns with a knight where they can't be removed, that is the best way of stopping a pass pawn, is with a knight.
And then also hit him with a fork here in a minute. But it's not clear to me that I would want to trade this knight for that bishop just yet.
No, you never want to trade. So the way you definitely don't want to trade, because if you fork the queen and the knight and then you take the bishop, black will take back with a pawn, and his pawn on d5 will no longer actually be isolated. It will be protected by a pawn on e6.
So you want to keep pieces on the board when your opponent has an isolated pawn?
Generally you want, like, when you look, okay, so let's go with knight.
Well, I think you meant this.
So one thing that you want to keep in mind in a position like this especially is that when you have like a good knight, like you see this bishop on e6, there's nothing that it can attack. Let's go with queen.
Not too many options here. Well, said you don't like to simplify here, but he's kind of forcing me to trade. But is he though? But if I move to a7, for example, and he swings his queen down to c3, I don't really like that. Then I guess I would just come back, and then I'm gonna have a couple isolated pawns. So it might be better just to take here, even though you told me not to simplify.
I didn't exactly say that. I said don't trade the bishop or trade the knight for the bishop.
Yeah, I think that is my best move.
Okay, let's go with pawn.
I wonder if you mean to just go there right away.
Now, one thing that you want to remember, and especially in positions like this where you have a good knight against a bad bishop, or end games in general where you think you're doing better, is that you don't want to trade down pawns or pieces, because the less pawns that there are on the board, the easier it becomes for your opponent to defend. Now, your opponent played rook c8, which is not the best move, so let's go pawn.
Okay, I think we take.
Let's go with pawn.
With pawn. Huh. Do you mean activate my king, or do you mean push this pawn on the a file? Because I feel weird pushing that a pawn, because then you just give him a target. So I guess you must mean this.
That is the move that I mean, because it is an end game, so you do want to be able to bring your king to the center of the board.
Okay.
Here.
All right. Yeah, because if I just push to a4, that pawn is all of a sudden all my knights or all my rooks are going to go to.
Right. So let's go with king. Let's go with a pawn. Okay, now one thing here that you should be aware of is you see how black's this pawn, which is blockaded right now by the knight, which what that means is that you have a 3-on-2 majority on the king side. You've got f g h pawns against g and f. So if you come back to what I was saying earlier, black currently has one weakness, this pawn in the center. So you want to kind of try. Okay, so let's go with pawn.
All right.
Because again, there's really no weakness here. You see your pawn on a2 is guarded by your rook. Let's go with pawn.
I assume you mean this one.
Okay, now let's go with rook.
He's going to double up on that. So what I can do, well, I only have 2 minutes. This is what my gut's telling me, but I don't know if that's right. Something about that doesn't feel right.
It's actually more or less the move that I wanted to see.
Okay.
Because what you're seeing here is that your rook on b2 is actually, it's on an open file. Okay, let's go. Found a good move. Let's go with king. Let's go with rook.
Must necessarily mean that, right?
It's the only move, yeah. Let's go with pawn.
Okay. I think maybe you mean this guy here. Take away spots for his king to go or something?
Yeah, there was maybe a slightly better order to do it in, but this is not the end of the world.
Okay, we have a little bit of time pressure to consider here too.
Yeah, so the reason this was not the best move is because even though you put the pawns on dark squares, there's a blockade now after g6, which is why you should have pushed the other one to keep alive the possibility of creating an outside pass pawn on the h file.
Okay.
So let's see here. Let's go with let's go with pawn.
All right. I'm gonna be a little careful here. Otherwise, you just meant push a3. It's one of those two moves.
Yeah, so I'm not crazy about the f4 move, but it's not a terrible move. This is pretty advanced. I mean, it's very hard to play, but basically what you want to do is you need to create another weakness, because there's only one weakness here, this pawn in the center, but it's guarded by this bishop on e6. So you need to try to create more weaknesses, so your opponent has to focus on multiple areas. They can't just focus on this one pawn and that's it.
So did you just mean a3?
Yeah, I did mean a3, and the reason I meant a3 was because if you had put the pawn at a3, you could then move your rook from b2 down the board, whereas right now your rook is kind of tied to the pawn on a2. So like if you were to move the rook like rook b6, you would hang the pawn on a2, whereas on a3 it would be guarded by your other rook, so your rook would be free to move. Let's go with let's go with pawn.
Just do the same thing. Uh-oh. There's a vulnerability over here, isn't there? No.
It's not easy to play. Okay, let's go with let's go with pawn.
Pawn. Okay. I see what you're saying. Which one is it though? It's this one. Get a little tempo. Now, if he checks me here,
yeah, this is, I mean, it's a very tough position to play. But let's see what your opponent does here.
I feel like when we just get low on time, we should just so then
let's go with let's go rook.
Oh, did I blunder? Is that what happened? Go with
rook.
Okay, so I think right here. Uh-oh. This one feels like it's getting away from me, Hikaru.
Yeah, there were a couple other moves. Like, remember I told you to sack one. Okay, let's go with knight. King.
Only one move, right?
Let's go with rook.
Oh boy.
Wow, he found it. Let's go with rook.
Can't take that rook. Oof. Okay. Oh crap.
Yeah, that kind of got away. Yeah,
Oh
I think
no.
we're just gonna lose this one.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
Now
kind
it's
of a
tough.
forced checkmate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Ah,
I think we can kind of resign this one.
all right. Damn. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to know what I did wrong there.
Sure. Yeah. Let me just create a new board. 1 second. Right. So okay, let me just invite you. Okay. All right. So yeah, so in general terms, like, I mean, there's not much really to say about this game overall, but what I would say is when you get this position with the isolated pawn like this, for example, the best blockader of this pawn is almost always going to be a knight. So the dream is to get this knight from c3 to d4 to blockade this pawn, because for example, let me just make some random moves. Don't, it's just like, if you ever end up in some endgame, for example, like this, where the pawn gets rolling, this pawn is actually very strong running down the board, because now it is a very strong pass pawn. So generally the best way to prevent like a pass pawn from going down the board, especially like even if it's isolated or not, is that is to blockade with a knight. That's the best blockader that you can have to blockade a pawn, especially because, you know, in some position like this, black does not have pawns on c7 or e7 to remove the knight, because without pawns to push and get attack the knight, it's just a solid outpost here on d4.
And no dark squared bishop to attack the knight either.
Right. So I mean, it's just an outpost. It can't be removed, because there are no pawns to attack, and the bishop is on the light square, so it can't attack the knight either. So in general, most of this was pretty good. What I would say is, like, right around here, yeah, this is probably the critical moment, is when you look at this position. You see how most of your pawn, not even pawns, most of your pieces are on dark squares versus this light square bishop, which can't really attack anything. So in a position like this, what you want to do is, I guess f3 is the move, but you can even just play a3 first. And the point is that if black goes rook c3, you go rook d3.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And let's say we trade and he goes rook c8, you can now go f3 and bring the king in. And when you look at the queen side, you see like this rook, it protects the base here on a3. So there's really no way for black to attack either of these pawns with just the one rook, especially because the bishop's on light square, so it can't attack any of these pawns.
Yeah. And then so how would you exploit a kingside advantage in this position? You just march your king up the board little by little here, or?
So most of what you did was fine. I didn't like b5 because again it trades off a set of pawns here. But most of this was good. This was good. Probably first you should have played h4, but we got the same position anyway with a few more moves. And right about here is where I would say this is still good, this is still good, this is still good, and this is where you need to go h5. And the reason you go h5 is that even though the pawns are on the same color as this light square bishop, they're supporting each other as they go up the board. And so the idea is that you can maybe create an outside pass pawn on this h file.
Yeah.
And again, remember how I said you need the general rule of thumb in chess is in an end game, especially, it's probably not going to happen much to you, but in an end game, if your opponent has multiple weaknesses, generally there will be good chances of winning. If your opponent has one weakness, like just this one weak pawn, it's almost always going to be possible for your opponent to defend.
Right. Okay.
So what you do when you play h5, it's not even necessarily a weakness, but it's another distraction. Black's not only worried about this pawn d5, but has to worry about your idea of making a queen and a pass pawn on the king side here.
Yeah.
So h5 is a little bit better, because now, like, when you go g5, pawns are on dark squares, but after g6 you can't create a pass pawn anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
So you should probably play h5, and the point is that I guess black can play like rook to c1 here, but again, you can now go like rook to h2, and the idea is very simply g5 and h6.
Right. Okay.
And black can't really remove anything here. Your rook is guarding this pawn, as well as supporting g5 and h6. And if black goes rook e1, you just very quietly go to f4. And you'll notice the rook is guarding the knight on d4, and this rook guards this pawn. So basically, even though there's this annoying pin temporarily, you can just move your king next move and get out of the pin. And additionally, you can also go g5 h6 and create this pass pawn and go up the board.
So if I end up with my king on g3 in this position,
Mm-hmm.
and he throws a check, where would I just go right back to f4?
Well, first of all, your king is very safe on f4. This is also why the pawns are so important, because you see this pawn at f3, it stops everything here. There's no rook e4. So this pawn at f3 makes your king very safe here on f4, to the point where you can just go, like, for example, let's just say black moves, you actually just ignore it. You go g5 h6, and you basically try to create this passed pawn.
And he's got to move his rook back or something to defend, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe black can move a king possibly, but something like rook c1, h6 takes, and rook c8 is probably what would happen. But now again, what you end up with is a situation where in this position the bishop is always passive on e6, but now the rook is also going to end up being passive on c8 or on h8.
Yeah.
So you can now use your, let's just say black goes king here, you can now go like rook here. And now there's also another weakness. So you basically have this passed pawn that black has to deal with. The bishop is tied to the pawn, but now you also can attack this pawn at a6. So it's like just too many weaknesses for black to defend against.
Yeah.
Whereas when you go back, like if we just go back to the very start of this, like right back here, black really does not have any weakness. Black has one issue, which is this pawn, which is guarded by the bishop. But like this pawn at a6 is not a weakness, because the rook guards it while attacking the pawn at a2 and attacking the knight on d4. So you kind of have to try and create either additional weaknesses or get a passed pawn here. So because you have this majority where you can go for like g5, it makes a lot of sense. And also, probably you're wondering, like, why can't black just go f6 here and stop you from going g5 h6? But now the problem is the bishop is loose. You no longer have pawn guarding, so I can go check. And you can't just move your king anywhere, because even if you go here, I just check and collect the bishop on e6.
What if he moves his king back to his back rank?
If you go back, then you take with a knight.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So basically what you do is you kind of like, it's mixing the ideas here. Like you have this idea of creating a passed pawn. You also maybe have check. But if black doesn't react to this idea of getting passed pawn, then he's in really bad shape. But if he plays f6, which just stops the pawn, then you create a weakness on e6. So it's like you have a very simple idea, like rook h2. Like actually it's very simple. Rook h2, g5 h6, and so black can't really go f6 because then the bishop becomes too weak on e6, and so you have to keep you have to find a concept where you don't really do anything with like any of these pieces here in the center, the rook, knight, or the king, but you go for a pass pawn, or you look for ideas like rook b7, rook b6, and try to attack towards where the black king is. But this position is really good. But the main point is that one weakness is not enough to win a game normally.
And his bishop is still kind of tied to this pawn on d5 as well, because if he moves the bishop, say to like d7 or something, then I could just swing right here.
Well, in this case, black would take though. But what you could do is you could also now reroute your knight. You could also move the knight back,
and then you open up that discovery on the
right. And black actually is nothing better than bring the bishop back. And if black brings the bishop back, well, knight f4 hangs.
No, that doesn't work. Yeah.
But what you can do now is, again, you can. I mean, it's very hard to sort of explain this in a simple way, but you can now push the pawn again, because you see, like here, this rook is really good. You want to bring the rook in the game, right? Many different ways. But if you go rook b7, I can just move my king up, and the pawn at a2 is under attack. But you can also just play like a3 again, put the pawn on a dark square where it's supported by this rook, and now your rook on b2 becomes active to go down the board and join in the attack towards like the black king.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
And mainly the reason it's just so good is because you have this great knight and this great rook, and black can't create threats. So it's actually on white, where white just very slowly tries to improve the position because the rooks are stuck here and the bishop doesn't really do anything. But the one weakness on this one pawn on d5 is generally not going to be enough to win a game unless they accidentally just like move a bishop and hang the pawn. But yeah, this is why, like, when you get a good knight against a bad bishop in a situation like this, what you have to look for is there's the one weakness on this pawn on d5 that's blockaded, but then you have to either look at, like, try to find a way to attack this pawn, maybe something with rook b7, or the third idea where you just go and create a passed pawn as a distraction, and your opponent will have to react to that.
This feels like one of those good examples for showing sort of newer players that that end games can be much more complicated than middle games, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, I guess, if you're new, because you would assume that if there's like a lot more pieces on the board, then it makes it that much more complicated. But actually, when you simplify the board, it just becomes this infinite sea of possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that's kind of weird, even for myself, that like you'll see like grandmasters, they'll make mistakes in very simple positions with like very few pieces on the board, like even just a couple of pawns and just kings on the board, in a way that you won't see like in the middle of the game when there are like a lot more pieces on the board.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes a big difference.
Is that because there are just a lot more candidate moves in the end game? There's a lot more lines that you have to analyze?
I don't think it's that there are more lines you have to analyze. I think it's that it's concrete. Like it's like in this end game, I know what I'm aiming for with black, or with white rather, where I know what I'm trying to create. Like you have to come up with a concrete plan, because black can also just kind of I can chill out forever with my rooks here. So you have to come up with a concrete plan. Usually there's a solution. It's like there's a forced sequence of moves or a forced idea that doesn't apply to like the middle part of the game, because you're just looking at normal piece moves, and there usually are many moves that make sense. Whereas in the end game, there tend to be forced concepts that are very, very good, or just winning. Like this sort of end game, you're probably unfamiliar with this book, but there's this book called Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual. Now it's not a book that I recommend you try to study, because it's very, very advanced, but you might have heard of it.
It would have been a long I haven't bought chess books in a really long time. I remember buying like modern chess openings, like big thick books like that, but I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, so it's basically a book that focuses a lot on end games, and like, good knight, bad bishop, like bishop and knight end games, rook end games, all sorts of end games. Now it's for a very advanced level, but something like this position is exactly what you would see in a book like that, because you basically focus on what are the set ideas, and you can kind of ignore what your opponent does here, because your rook, your knight, and your king are so secure here with this light square bishop that black can't do anything. Like if you just choose to move your rook all over the place, black can't do anything here. He can't remove the knight, he can't really attack the pawn, so you kind of can just spend your time just moving all over the place.
Right. Okay.
So
right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the main thing though is just like when you get into a position with like something like this with like a really good knight, especially if you can get an outpost like this, remember that that you never want to trade this knight off, because if you ever trade, the pawns get connected. It's just like if you go way back, like all the way even back here, for example, you never want to you never want to trade, because this pawn actually becomes strong now it's just a support, it's just a protected pass pawn if you think about it.
But it feels strong just because you bust up their pawn structure so much. So like now when you look at the board, it might seem appealing to be on the offense against 3 pawn islands, but what you're saying, obviously,
yeah. Now the one thing I will say is, again, this is why chess is very difficult. There are certain times when this would make sense, but the only time that like you could have an isolated pawn, I'll go back and let me try to find a completely different position with an isolated pawn. I'm just you don't really need to you don't need to worry about my moves.
Yep.
But I'm just making random moves. Let me set up some position, something like this and this, something like this. Now you see this is actually quite similar, because you see how you have a great knight on d4, you have an outpost, and black has no pawns to remove the knight, right? And he has this pawn that's blockaded by the knight. Now in some situations, like early in the middle game, like a situation like this, taking is actually not a bad move, because when you take here, you can actually take advantage of this diagonal and the light square weaknesses with like knight to e2, knight f4, knight g6, or knight e6.
Yeah, you got more pieces to attack with here.
Right. So in a situation where there are a lot of pieces on the board, sometimes you can do it, but I would say probably in 90%, at least where you're at, do not look to if you ever get this one of these positions where you get a knight like this against a bishop, don't look to trade the knight. Try to keep the knight anchored on this outpost square of d4 here.
All right.
Great. Okay. All right, so I think maybe we should actually just go over these rules briefly as well. I think maybe so. What do we have? So I pulled it up. I'll send it to you as well afterwards. Because I got this, but it's like it says a group stage is it's 4 RR groups of 4. So I think it's round robin. So I think we play 4 game. I think we play everyone in our group, if I'm not mistaken.
So that'd be 3 games, right? if there's 4
Yeah,
people?
sorry. So it's so in each matchup, players plays both black and white pieces, 10 plus 5. So that means you play 6 games total, or maybe more if it's tied. But anyway, 1 point for a win, half for a draw, 0 for a loss. Cumulative points over the course of the match to determine the winning team. And there's going to be like a championship and a consolation bracket. So it's basically exactly the same as PogChamps, if I understand it.
Is the championship match single elimination? I saw something about single elims for either the playoffs or the championship.
So championship, first place from each group advanced to championship bracket. Second, third place from each group advanced to consolation bracket. Fourth place from each group are eliminated from the tournament. Okay, so that means that only first place makes the championship bracket. Championship bracket, all matches are 2 games. So it's single elimination that if you lose the match you're out, but it's still 2 games. You play one with white, one with black.
Okay.
And then in the consolation bracket, all the matches are 1 game. So that is single. That's like the single elimination.
We're not going to be in that bracket.
No, we're gonna win our bracket.
So, we're gonna win.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I feel better.
Yeah, I'm sure we can talk more tomorrow before the event begins as well. But I mean, I think it should be fun, and you have pretty good understanding. I think mainly, I mean, if you're gonna play any chess before tomorrow, just play a couple of games to try and move a little bit quicker, get the flow of playing at a slightly faster pace, because that I think is the only issue that we might have, is if we're a little bit too slow.
Yeah, I think I'll hop on probably around 11 a.m. my time tomorrow to play a little bit beforehand.
Nice. Yeah, so it's gonna be fun, and looking forward to it, and hopefully, I mean, we're gonna crush. So let's just win our bracket, and then the real event begins.
Me too, man. I'm feeling good about it. I think we're a powerhouse.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna go well.
All right, that was great.
Yeah,
so just hit me up tomorrow, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving me the lesson. I appreciate you picking me. It means a lot. So
no problem. All right, have a good rest of your stream.
You too, buddy.
All right, bye.